Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the channel with another Mock Draft Monday for you guys here today. You know what it is. Every Monday, you get a mock draft in a video form, and that's exactly what's going on here. And before we get started, a couple things. First, if you can like the video, that'd be greatly appreciated. Subscribe if you're new, and hit that notification bell as well, because over 79% of you guys watching are not subscribed, and a decent chunk of you are returning viewers. So if you like what you're seeing, hit that subscribe button. Now, we've been using the Pro Football Focus Draft Simulator because it seems to be as close to realistic as we can, but some tragedy over the past couple of days before I recorded this mock draft Monday, and that is they have put it behind a paywall. You have to pay $7 to $9 a month basically if you want to do it, and you can only do 2 rounds and only a handful a day. Fuck you, Pro Football Focus. Seriously. No one's paying for that shit, so I'm moving over back to what I usually would use, and that is the Draft Network. And all you have to do, it is free, but you do have to create an account, I believe, to access it. So it hasn't been an issue for me because I've been able to use their website, and they've been a fantastic source for creating big boards and monitoring all the things that I do for draft research. So the Draft Network right now is going to be what we go to. So here's what we're going to do in this particular mock draft. Some people have requested it through DM and in comments. They want me to go through how these drafts go about and why I make the picks I do. So here's how we're going to do it. I'm going to show you the footage of how the draft goes, where we stand, and then ultimately what I think the Cowboys would do in that situation. Not what I would do, but what the Cowboys would do, because now we're kind of starting to see who they're visiting, who they like, who they don't like. And I think now, with all that out of the way, we can finally dive into this mock draft. So sit back, relax, and let's go ahead and get started. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, just booted up the mock draft simulator provided by the Draft Network. If you want to partake, go to the Draft Network, create an account. It's completely free. I've done this for years now, until this year I decided to use Pro Football Focuses before they put behind a fucking paywall. So go fuck yourself, Pro Football Focus. But this is completely free. If you want to do trades and stuff like that, that is behind a paywall, but you can at least do this portion for free. And it's been relatively realistic for who's on the board. You do have some randomness where like this one guy might fall to you, but that happens every so often in the draft. Like you might be like, oh my god, how is this guy still here? And then he goes. So we're going to go through a couple ground rules. Number one, we're going to do with what the Cowboys would do, and I would provide my input for what I would do if I was in the draft war room. But of course, we got to think about what Jerry and Steven are thinking. Of course, Mike McCarthy and what they're thinking there. And that would probably be overruled if it's a certain particular prospect. Now, that's the first thing. Second thing, if you want to play along, you're more than happy to do so. Tell me what you would do in the situation, and we're not going to go through a explanation of the player because we're going to do that before we make the pick. Then you'll get the nice little graphic, and then we'll move on to the next. We got 3 rounds to go through. Let's see how we nail it, and then when we get to the end, I'll grade it, you grade it, and then you can grade yourself how you think you did. So let's go ahead. Let's start this mock draft, completely randomized. Let's see how this goes. I'm really curious to see where Jalen Carter goes. He goes to Seattle, I see there. Tyree Wilson's falling, and he is going to go to the Bears. That is a huge steal if I've ever seen one. Will Levis is still on the board, surprisingly. So I'm hoping someone takes him, maybe Washington. Yep, no. Will Levis still on the board. Interesting. Will Levis has fallen, and I don't expect that to happen, but Bijan Robinson is on the board, and we kind of know how the Cowboys think. So let's just look through it together from the needs. So cornerback long-term is going to be a need. I'm going to pause the draft so we can think through this because we would have like 10 minutes. So we got Julius Brents, Kelly Ringo, and Emmanuel Forbes. Ringo and Forbes, the Cowboys have definitely met with. I'm a fan of Deonte Banks as well. I'm not sure how the Cowboys feel on him. Go to edge rusher, Will McDonald, a name you want to keep out on as well. Why? Because you did have Dan Quinn go to that pro day out at Iowa State. In the interior, you have your pick of Mozzie Smith. You have CK, from Pitt. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. If someone could tell me, that would be greatly appreciated. I think it's Kalijah Cansey. If I could be wrong there, and if I'm correct, then holy shit, that's awesome. And then you have Brian Brees. I'm not a fan of Brian Brees. I think that is a red flag there, and I could be wrong there. But from what I understand, the Cowboys really like Mozzie Smith. And if you're someone that's like, I want them to take an interior defensive lineman, he's the closest you're going to get to the Cowboys maybe taking him, because he was a 30-day visit, by the way. In the interior, you have your picking of JMS, Osiris Torrance, Cody Monch. I don't think they would go that way with Cody. I think they would rather go with Torrance or JMS, but I'm not sure if they would go that high on JMS. I think that depends on how they're feeling on their draft board. Linebacker, you have your picking of all your linebackers. A name you want to keep an eye on, Jack Campbell. He would be a prototypical linebacker the Cowboys would take. Drew Sanders would be a do-it-all type of guy. And Trenton Simpson, also a nice little player there. And Henley, another good player to keep an eye out on in this process. Now, what's good about the Cowboys is they're going to need a linebacker, but I think it has cooled off enough to where a linebacker you could put on the back burner. Anton Harrison's a name as well to keep an eye out on, and that is definitely a possible option there. Of course, we talked about Will Levis being on the board, which is crazy. So a trade down scenario would definitely be in play for the Cowboys here. We all know who the hell's on the board at running back, and we kind of have to also account for that. And so we have to, again, go for that. If he's on the board, the Cowboys will take him. Not my particular pick at this juncture. Just we have to, go over the facts there. At safety, out after, you kind of get after Brian Branch, it's really dry after that from what I've seen. And then, in case you're wondering about your tight ends, Darnell Washington is there. And then you also have some pickings of some other guys. And at wide receiver, you have Zay Flowers and company. And by the way, I do like Josh Downs and Zay Flowers and stuff like that, but we have to think about who is on the board. Now, if it were my call, knowing how this draft board has fallen, I would probably go with, again, if I could be wrong, Kalijah Cansey, the interior defensive lineman out of Pitt. I think he would be awesome in Dallas. Or John Michael Schmitz. I think you could play him at guard and plug him in at center. I'm really curious where they put Steve Avila at. And, okay, so we're going to keep an eye on him. He could go in the first round, by the way. And so I'm going to assume that he will. But knowing how Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones would be, I'd probably get heckled out of the room as they select Bijan Robinson. Now, I kind of want to talk about this pick. The Cowboys are finally going to look at possibly getting away from taking the running backs and then paying them after a bit. And if it were me, I would stay away from Bijan Robinson because knowing the Cowboys, they will repeat the same mistake. However, we have to think about what they would do. And knowing them, they'd be like, we need one final piece. And Bijan Robinson could be that, you know how much money they would make? How much money he would make off of his jersey? Like, holy shit. So, whether you like it or not, I'm going to go with what the Cowboys would do in this situation. I'm thinking they go Bijan Robinson, running back, Texas.
With the 26th pick, the Dallas Cowboys select
Bijan Robinson, running back, Texas. So if that happens, I think you're going to have a mixed reaction amongst the fan base. Some being like, what the fuck? Others losing their goddamn minds in excitement. For me, I'm not going to be upset about the pick because he's a good player. But I think that the Cowboys making that pick could come to bite them in the ass. But I'm shocked Kalijah can't see. Okay, there he goes. Okay, so here we are. We're at pick 58. I know it says 59, but we got to remember that the Dolphins lost their first rounder because of the whole situation they were down there. So let's go through and talk about what the Cowboys could do here. So a cornerback, you have Emmanuel Forbes, a guy who they have met with. Let's take a look at some other guys. Deonte Banks, one of my guys I really like. At edge rusher, unfortunately, Will McDonald is not there, so that's something to keep in mind as well. With your interior defensive lineman, if you're a favor of the lineman out of Baylor, I'm not a big fan of Baylor interior defensive linemen. And while he has shown good tape to prove me otherwise, I have my doubts knowing the program. When you Steve Avila is still on the board, but to understand the situation, and Andrew Voorhees would definitely be such a Cowboys selection, like to redshirt him. So that's something to keep in mind as well, especially. Then you look at the linebackers. You have your pickings, and Drew Sanders in the second round would be, I was slamming the table for. Then you go to your offensive tackles. Nothing really there. Quarterbacks, too rich for your blood there. If you were wondering where the running backs looked like there you go. Jordan Battle, people talk about him, but again, I think after Brian Branch, it's just whatever. Luke Musgrave, an interesting, tight end prospect that people keep talking about. And then at wide receiver, you're kind of, oh Lord, you do have Boutte from LSU that could be the most Cowboys pick ever. But to kind of deliberate what I think would happen here, you would probably see an argument between Drew Sanders and Emmanuel Forbes. If it were me, I would probably be telling you to take Drew Sanders. But we kind of had to, we have to think about how the Cowboys would go about this. If the Cowboys were looking at this, they would probably be like, okay, we got the running back, we got our offensive weapon, we did good with the wide receivers, our offensive line, I think we're, good with where we're at. They're going to have that deliberation. However, what I would say is they might turn to the cornerback because you look at the long term, right? And I think in the long term, you're going to need someone, especially if Stephon Gilmore is not back. And I think they're going to take Emmanuel Forbes here. Again, I would go with Drew Sanders here. It would be awesome to see him and Micah paired up. But I think for this case, we're going to go with Emmanuel Forbes.
The Dallas Cowboys select
Emmanuel Forbes, cornerback, Mississippi State. Alrighty, let's keep this train rolling. We got one more pick remaining in this third round, and then we are going to call it quits, and you could tell me what you guys think about this draft, what I would grade it, and what you would grade it, and all that other stuff, and then we'll close out of here. Definitely an interesting draft, to say the least, and I believe our pick is coming up now. Alrighty, let's go ahead and pause this draft one last time. Let's take a look at the field. We already took a running back. First round, and again, not a fan of the pick in the sense of the value at the running back position because you could definitely get a lot more. But I'm thinking what the Cowboys are thinking. You get a guy who you really liked at the cornerback position in Emmanuel Forbes. Now, let's take a look. Edge rusher. Not a lot there for me to like. Interior defensive lineman. Not really much there. Andrew Voorhees would be an interesting pick for the Cowboys. By the way, a name you want to keep an eye out. Antonio Mafi. He did meet with the Cowboys. So that's something you want to keep an eye out on, and I wouldn't be shocked if he was a pick as well if they are trying to go offensive line. Linebacker. I'm telling you right now, Henley, I would be doing cartwheels if we got him in the third round, but we kind of also have to think with who the Cowboys have met with and what their other stuff kind of dried up at our offensive tackle. Running back, Kenny McIntosh is a guy that the Cowboys met with, so that's something you want to also keep in mind. Luke Schoonmaker is a guy that the Cowboys have met with, and that's pretty much where they're at there. So let's kind of deliberate what the Cowboys would do here. So I think that if the Cowboys had this draft go down the way it did, I would think that you would want to get someone in the interior that can play right now, considering that Connor McGovern has, left the building, and you're kind of like, okay, what am I going to do at this point in time? Like, that's where you kind of look at your offensive lineman, right? I personally think if we're going off of who the Cowboys visit with and on their big board, if Voorhees was healthy, he would definitely be the pick. But I think that they go with the offensive lineman here. They get their left guard to plug in because knowing with what they've kind of shown, they're not going to be afraid to go after a guard, especially if it's in the first round. But again, we have to consider who else is on the board. So, with that being said, if this was my call, I would be going for Henley here. But, also, by the way, DeMarvin Overshown is a guy they met with as well. I don't know if they would go that route, primarily because of the fact that We need to see who else they've met with. But we're going to be doing a mock draft on Tuesday. Or actually, I'm sorry. We have Cole's Cowboys on Tuesday. I'm sorry. I've had a very busy weekend, so I do apologize. But I think that for the Cowboys here, you go out, you get your offensive lineman, and then you kind of think, okay, but Space Cowboy, when are we going to take a linebacker? I think knowing how this draft is going, you have plenty of guys here. I think that you have Noah Sewell. I don't think there's going to be a run on these 4 guys. You should definitely get someone in the 4th round. And if the Cowboys really like one, they could definitely trade up.
The Dallas Cowboys select
Antonio Mafi, offensive guard, UCLA. I'm just curious to see how this draft closes out, ladies and gentlemen, and then we will go ahead and put this on lock. Interestingly enough, none of the linebackers went, so that was definitely a fun little draft here. So let's go ahead and take a look at the team needs. So they didn't address interior defensive linemen, but I have a feeling they're going to bring back Hankins and maybe Carlos Watkins comes back. I could be wrong there. You then look at the rest of their needs, right? I think that because Bijan Robinson's there, they would definitely take him with that first pick, but I would have gone a different direction there. You go with Emmanuel Forbes in the 2nd round, you get your cornerback of the future, and then finally you go with Mafi in the 3rd round. You get someone that is going to be a starting guard at left guard for the next couple of years, and this allows you to have Tyler Smith at left tackle because it looks like the plan is going to be, Tyron Smith is going to be your swing tackle, which is fantastic news. So, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that is our mock draft. Go back to the picks. If this is how the Cowboys drafted in the 1st round, I'm probably giving them, for the players and where they're getting them, I'm probably giving them a B plus maybe. Especially with Emmanuel Forbes, people have said he could go in the 1st round. I would be shocked by that, but at the same time, not really, knowing the player. But I would say B to B plus. Please tell me what you think down below. The Bijan pick kind of just throws me off a little bit because it's like you could get so much more value, but again, I had to think about how this war room would be talking to be like, no, we're taking Bijan. Emmanuel Forbes in the 2nd round, that would definitely happen, especially if, none of the other guys they've scouted they're there. And Mafi's a name you want to keep an eye out on because he can definitely go in the 3rd round or 4th round. But I think the Cowboys would pull the trigger there because looking at how these linebackers are falling, you could probably be like, okay, I'd rather take Mafi here and because of the offensive lineman, and then I would take a linebacker later. So that is our mock draft for today, guys. I will be seeing you guys in the next one. Have a great rest of your day. Goodbye.